Okay, her crisis averted. Pardon me. Next up is one that's well respected by comic creators, but I'm not sure how widely recognised it is with just like your average comic buyer, and that is Zot by Scott McCloud. Now, this book, Zot's a weird one because it came out in the mid-80s, which was around about the time of the black and white boom. But when it started, I think it was the first 10 or 12 issues were colour. And Zot, when it started out, was basically like this retro sci-fi story about this young superhero called Zachary T. Plusgutz, who lives in the far-flung future of 1965. So he lived in a parallel universe, which was still 1965, whereas our world was in the 80s. And he somehow found a gate to get through to our world, and he met this girl called Jenny Weaver, and her brother Butch, I think it was. And the old series is brilliant. The colour period was really good because I think in the colour one, they go to his world and Butch gets zapped into an ape. You can get the colour one, but it's really hard to find. So I do recommend looking for it though. But so it's basically like that. So it's this weird amalgam of sci-fi and slice of life, but the sci-fi is set in a retro world in the 1960s, but the world itself, it's retro, but it's really advanced. So it's like how the 1960s TV viewed sci-fi, viewed how we'd be in the future. That's what it's like. But then, I think it was from issue 10 or 12, I think it was number either 11 or 12, the comic switched to black and white. And that's when it really fell into its own. I mean, Scott McCloud, he's the writer and artist of Understanding Comics. And he did this before Understanding Comics. And this is like a textbook illustration of how to do a comic, how to keep interest, how to pace a story, how to make the most of a panel grid. Just amazing. But like I said, I'd never, at the time, it stood out from the 80s crowd of either Dark and Gritty, because Dark and Gritty was around about that time, so Dark and Gritty superheroes and your standard heroes. It was fun, but it had a real indie sensibility. So you had the superhero sci-fi element, but then you had slice of life, angsty, dealt with issues like struggling with being gay as a teenager, young crushes, making bad choices when you're young, and things like that. And it was all held together with just amazing artwork. I mean, that is just superb. It's clean. It's got an almost Japanese feel to it. Let's have another look. Now, I'm not sure how easy this is to get hold of. I got this quite a number of years ago now, but have a look on Amazon or eBay, and I do recommend it. So, meaty book. It's quite a reasonable price. Oh, it was when I got it. You get just shy of 600 pages story in it. Yeah, and it's great. Like I said, it's one of those undiscovered classics. What you might hear artists referencing, but you don't see much of, or you don't see it recognised much. Anyway, moving on. Getting close to the end now. Let me just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I might have to pick another one. Anyway, next up is Mouse. Now, do I need to say anything about this? I mean, in my mind, it's the most important graphic novel you could get. I mean, I find it crazy how some schools in America have banned this. It shouldn't be banned. This should be required reading on the curriculum. I've read this so many times. For me, it hits home because I had the privilege of knowing a few people, a few amazing older women who've unfortunately passed away now, who lived through the Holocaust. Who had one of the ladies had, she was a doctor. She had her number on her wrist. She lost all her family. So it hit home because I thought, my God, this is what they went through. And it hits home in such a simple, because it's done like this, where the characters are done like animals. So the Jews are mice, and what are the Nazis, the Germans are pigs, I think. Yeah. So by doing like funny animal artwork on it, you don't realise what an impact they still have on you. But then, the more you read about it, you forget that you're reading that the characters are mice and pigs, etc. The humanity or the inhumanity of some of the Nazis, especially of the Nazis, of course, it becomes even more impactful because of them being done in a funny animal style. But yeah, I've read this must be over 10 times, and each time, I kind of sit down after I finish reading it for about an hour, just mulling over the impacts and what I've read, that people actually live through this. 2, I'm thankful that I haven't had to live through it. 3, that we should never forget. And 4, that I'm grateful that Art Spiegelman made this document of what his family went through. So he'll never forget, and we'll never forget. Because we shouldn't. I mean, you get so many Holocaust deniers, and this just shows how stupid they are. Anyway, so let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so I need to get another book in a bit, so I'll pause the camera in a bit. But my next one, coming off a completely different tangent. Again, black and white. Now, I'm old. I've said I'm old a lot of times, but so I've followed comics from when I was really tiny in the mid-70s, all the way through to now. But when it's about 14, 15, somehow I used to go to this shop that sold second-hand comics and other but you also sold dodgy stuff. When you're 14 or 15, like, ooh. But of course I had a panic attack and never looked in that section. But he had this section of comics, and I'd never seen anything like them before, and they were called underground comics. And there was 2 that particularly stuck out to me. There was one called Fat Freddy's Cat, which I read first, and then I found out that Fat Freddy's Cat was a strip that was reprinted from a comic called The Fabulous Fairy Freak Brothers. And oh my God, I loved them. They were outrageous. I mean, basically, it's a group of hippies in the late 60s, early 70s. They're just stoners. I mean, I've never taken any drugs in my life. So it was completely bizarre to me. So it's like I was reading a science fiction book about these fascinating cartoon characters who were living a life that I couldn't relate to, but I loved what they got up to. Gilbert Shelton, who created the Freak Brothers, I mean, that cover is just iconic. He's in a class of his own for humour. Even if you're pro-drugs or anti-drugs, it doesn't matter. It's like Cheech and Chong, but funny. I've tried Cheech and Chong and I thought, no. But this, I had to get this book. When I saw this book advertised years ago, I thought, yeah, I've got to get it. I used to have the underground comics, but as with a lot of my stuff, they got chucked out. So when I found this, I thought, yeah, I've got to get it. And honestly, you need to read it. You'll never read anything I can safely say you'll never read anything like this ever again in your life. It's just, but in a good way. It's so funny. So it's basically about three characters. I mean, you know it's good if Alan Moore recommends it. He doesn't give many recommendations. So it's basically these three stoner hippies. Who is it? Phineas T. Ferb. He's this chap here with the long nose and the crazy hair beard. And then you've got Fat Freddy, who's my favourite. Complete stoner, but I don't know if he likes food or weed more. And then, what's he called? The Texan guy. One sec. It's been a while since I've read this. You know what? I think I'm having a brain fart. Freewheeling Franklin, that's it. He's like the cool, well, he thinks he's cool, one out of the group. But yeah, it's just great. Very funny. One of the funniest books I've ever read. So I'm just going to pause it again and get the last two books.